Welcome to Understanding Oklahoma, a series of conversations looking at the richness but also the complexity of the histories and cultures that make Oklahoma such a distinctive place to live. I want to welcome our guest today, Nguyen, a wonderful person on campus. He is the Director of Student Life and Assistant Dean of Students. Nguyen has also served as the advisor of the Campus Activities Council and OU Cousins Program. As an undergraduate student at OU, Nguyen was actively involved with orientation programs. One of his passions has been his work with the Children's Hospital Foundation in Oklahoma City. In 2013, he was honored as the Volunteer of the Year for his work with Sooner Dance Marathon. He's also been honored by the OU Student Government Association for his work advising students. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
When we talk about understanding Oklahoma, I think people so often think of Native nations here and different various communities. But a real interesting fact, I think, is that the third most often spoken language in Oklahoma is Vietnamese. Could you please give us an overview of the Vietnamese community and experience in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think a lot of what you noticed was in the mid 1970s. You noticed a lot of people migrating and as refugees from Vietnam due to the war, and so a lot of them settled here in Oklahoma.
Oh, mid 70s?
Yeah, mid 70s. So about 1975 is when my family came, and what you noticed was they were coming to areas where there was kind of these communities growing. They wanted to be around people that maybe shared the same culture, and so. That's what really drew them to Oklahoma. And at the time, you had to be sponsored by someone to be able to come to America. And so Catholic Charities in Oklahoma City actually sponsored my family. And so it was one of the reasons that we chose Oklahoma. In addition, my grandfather, he was really looking for an area that was more climate, comparable to climate to Vietnam. He was originally in Boston, and then he was like, let's go to Oklahoma. We had some family down here. And so that's what brought our family to Oklahoma. But if you go down to Oklahoma City, you'll find a very vibrant Asian district. And really, it's mainly a Vietnamese population down there. And so you start to see kind of this area that has just grown and really helped establish the Vietnamese community here in Oklahoma City.
I think there are challenges that are different for every community. Could you talk about the challenges faced by the Vietnamese community a little bit then and also now?
Yeah, I think then there was a newness. They were so different, and there was not a lot of them here. And so I think just to be able to establish a community, I think to find community and to find people to connect with. And so you start seeing a lot of churches being built, a lot of Vietnamese kind of restaurants and just areas where people could connect with their community. And so I think at that time they were probably just trying to establish themselves, create this better life that they wanted for their families. I think as you've moved, and we've had multi-generations that have been here, I think there's always going to be waves of immigrants that come here. But from that first generation, a lot of them are starting to have families and having their kids that are older now that, have gone to college. And so now those kids are having, their kids going to college. And so I think what's interesting now is that it's so different. Like the populations are they're kind of, there's a spectrum of people that have been here for a couple of generations and people that have been here for one generation, And so I think now it's about looking about how do we, as for myself being the firstborn in my family in America, I think my parents really wanted me to assimilate and to be truly American and to speak English and to go to schools, to go to great schools and to be successful. Kind of like the American dream is what they would call it. But I think now my generation, you would see, I think there's a loss of our culture. And because we've tried to assimilate so much that a lot of us have lost the language. A lot of us haven't ever been back to Vietnam, and so I think that there's a balance of what that looks like, is wanting to be so American, but then also losing a part of your identity. And so, yeah, I think
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the generational part is really important. I think the sort of traditional look at this is that the first generation goes to the trouble to get there.
Yeah.
The second generation does the heavy lifting, articulating the two cultures and where they meet. And then the third generation is the assimilated one, which knows more about the place they're in than the place they came from.
That's correct.
So are you third generation experience?
Yeah, I would probably say I'm probably like in the second, but maybe crossing over to the third because America's all I've known. Oklahoma's all I was born here, you know, and so this is all I've known. But I think it's been hard to navigate. It's been interesting to see my mom, like really love this country, but then also realizing that there were so many great things about Vietnam that aren't necessarily here. I think we talk a lot about community, and talking to my mom, in Vietnam, everyone kind of grew up, like your family kind of grew up in the same village, and so it was really easy to after church go to see family and visit, or on weekends to be with family. Whereas now I think to be American is to be independent and to go and do things, to go to college and to move on.
Do you feel torn between the two? Your family pulling you back and your work life, your education life pulling you out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think they came for a better life, and part of that is, I think the work, but with the work comes, there is a struggle between kind of bringing those two worlds together. Is like want to be successful, but also success sometimes comes with a lot of work. And
Oklahoma is such a distinctive place, but it seems to me that Vietnamese culture and Oklahoma culture seem to connect on enough points that it's not a huge heavy lift to acculturate here. Am I right? What do I know? Am I right about that?
I think in some ways, I don't want to speak on behalf of all the Vietnamese population, but I think a lot of Vietnamese are very religious. I think they have a strong, I think you would find like Buddhism and Catholicism as like the main faiths there. And so to come to Oklahoma that is pretty conservative and that has like this kind of background of faith, I think it feels like a little comfortable. I think when you think about Oklahoma and kind of like the blue collar kind of aspect to our lives, I think Vietnamese people, really a lot of immigrants, a lot of the jobs that they could get here were labor and like very blue collar, and so I think they see that hard work. That's what their belief is. Like hard work really does pay off, and so I think there are some shared values from what Oklahoma is, and really what the Vietnamese immigrant experience is.
Could you share some of your own experiences, good or bad, just that helped to define the experience of the place for you?
Yeah, for me, I my family came and we were able to open up a restaurant, and that's kind of how we became kind of more stable and kind of moved from like a lower class to a middle class. And for me, I was lucky to go to OU, and as an Asian American student, I think it was one of those things where coming to OU there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me, and so to find a place, to find a community that had people that looked like me gave me kind of a home base when I came to OU. And I think about the immigrant experience of when they come here, where do they go? And it's a lot of times like these enclaves, like you see a lot of Chinatowns and Asian districts, and when you do like your history, you realize that they were able to be successful because they created their own community where they were able to bring in money from the outside through like tourism or through food sales, and they were able to kind of keep that money from outside, but then also look out for their own community. And so I think for me, I see some parallels with a lot of our Asian American students who may come to OU and feel a little lost, and finding that community here that maybe looks like them or has those same kind of shared values or beliefs or shared life experiences, and they can find some comfort and community there, and then really use that as a springboard to kind of explore other areas.
For the moment that we're talking, there's quite a bit in the news about violence against Asians. But it's my understanding, too, that this didn't just pop up now. We're paying attention now, but it's been happening for a long time. Could you talk a little bit about that? Maybe what it makes you and your family, how you feel when you hear about violence against Asians, and how does it impact your life?
I've been very fortunate to work in my role and to really be able to talk to students, especially of our Asian Pacific Islander descent. And it's really hard. I mean, I think any sort of racial harm or racialized violence is hard to take in, especially when you can relate it to yourselves. And, I think within the past year, we've just seen an increase of people not understanding. I think it's this idea of Asian people being like all like a monolith.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is we're so different, and our communities are so different. And I think this recent incident in Atlanta just really hit close to home for so many people because at some point, our families were immigrants. Mm-hmm. And at some point, our families were only able to get jobs that you found that those people that were killed could do, whether it's a nail shop, whether it's hair salon, whether it's restaurant, whether it's your own business. But I think for a lot of our students and for myself personally, I saw my mom, I saw my aunts who for a lot of them, that may have been like the only job they could have gotten coming here. And for them, they just wanted a better life. And so it hits close to home. And I think for a lot of students, that reality of like that we're never, there were so many different horrible things, obviously, about it was racism, it was like sexism, it was all these different things. But, at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest takeaways is it feels that, we are never truly American. And I think that's a big Asian experience, is that we are never seen as American. Even for someone like me who is born here, people look at me and they don't always see that I'm American. They always see me as a foreigner because of the way I look. And I think for a lot of our Asian community, that is such a big part of, kind of how we interface with the world that we live, is that we never are it never fully feels that we belong here.
Don't you think we have to somehow make what's happened recently, the violence against Asians and the killings, it's so unthinkable, but we have to somehow turn it around. Mm-hmm. We've got to make this a moment of learning.
Yes.
And so maybe there will be that advantage. It was hidden to mainstream culture. Now it's out in the open. Now we can begin to deal with it.
No, absolutely. And I actually, I used a quote the other day you gave to me, is that, sometimes when there's like a virus, medicine always will come, like, right? And so and on these really tough times, what is the medicine that's going to come and help heal the community? And I think about our people, and I think about this awareness of, I think when a lot of our parents first immigrated here, they wanted to assimilate. They didn't want to cause trouble. And so it was easy to like kind of blend in. And I think for a lot of Asians, they saw themselves as protected because there were other communities that were probably a little bit more attacked, like a lot of marginalized communities. Whereas now, I think there's this awareness of, hey, no matter where you are, whether you think that there's like a desirability between different races or colorism or whatever, that it's still going to affect you. And so for me, the medicine that I see is a lot of our college students, a lot of our youth, there's this energy of speaking up and standing in solidarity with so many organizers. And so that to me is where I get really excited, is that there's like these movements moving, and that Americans or Asian Americans are speaking up before they would be silent. But I feel like now there's like this power, this empowerment for them to speak up and to really advocate for not only their communities, but other marginalized communities.
Yeah. And I don't want to suggest there's a single Asian response to anything. Of course there isn't. But what would you think that the Asian community would most like mainstream community to understand or know that they don't know now?
Yeah. One, I think the biggest thing is that we're not a monolith. I think it's really easy when you think about Asian to think of someone that maybe looks like me, Southeast Asian or East Asian, but the diversity in the Asian community is just so great, and the spectrum is so wide. And so I would want people to understand that not all of our experiences are the same. There's a lot of Asian people that, maybe came here early on building the railroads that are, fourth generation Americans, whereas there might be people that have now immigrated. There may be people that are South Asian descent versus, East Asian descent, and all those experiences are very different. And that's what makes it so beautiful. That's also what makes it difficult to organize, because all of our experiences are so different. And so how do we kind of come together around some certain shared experiences to work together to move our communities forward?
The founders for the U.S. had such a beautiful conception in some ways of a multicultural democracy, and it seems like every now and then we really need to recommit ourselves to that and realize that any community that comes in is revitalizing. I mean, there's a perpetual youth about American culture as long as the doors are open. That just seems like such an important point.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
What 2 or 3 takeaways would you like people who are listening to this discussion to keep in mind that would lead them around to the right place in some ways?
You know, I think one, I think especially if I'm talking to a collegiate student, I think for me, I would really encourage them to learn about themselves, whether they're part of the community or they're not. College is such a great time to engage with your identity and to explore who you are. So, you know, I think there may be some Asian students that, you know, grew up in a very Asian household. And, you know, they probably understand like certain things about what it means to be Asian. And there may be other Asian students that maybe didn't grow up around other Asian people. And so how awesome is it that you can come to college and to really explore your identities and explore who you are if you didn't have that before. So that would be the first thing I would really encourage students to do is, just explore themselves and explore their identity, find out who they are.
And for the mainstream, stop thinking about other people as monolithic.
Yes.
Focus on the particularity of the person in front of you.
Yeah. And like come to a space with the willingness to learn and to not center your identities. You know, I think I always, you know, college is a great time to learn about other cultures. But if you come into that space with your own identity as a center, you're never going to learn. And so if you can like suspend that and allow the other identities to be the center, I think there's just so much growth and so much richness that you can really gain from that experience. And so that would probably, those are probably 2 really good pieces of advice.
Nguyen, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was wonderful having you here. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll see other episodes of Understanding Oklahoma.